Alright guys, this is Steve from Steeds Tech. I'm going to go over another tutorial on a benchtop tester. Once the program opens up, you're going to click the drop down and you're going to look for what COM ports you have. Depending on your computer, you might have multiple COM ports. Once you identify which COM port is connected to the benchtop tester, you're going to select it and click connect. First thing you're going to have is a firmware version on the top right. Current firmware is 1.271. Your BGT status. Ideally, when you first power up the box and you open the program, you shouldn't have anything connected. So when it pops up, yours should also say not detected. And bottom right is my logo. If you double click on here, Internet Explorer or Edge will pop up, or Firefox, whatever you use, and it'll take you to my website. Current software version is version 1.04. You have your commanded position, which is the position the controller is commanding it to. The actual position, which is feedback if it's available from the actuator. Same with the load, the temperature in Fahrenheit and Celsius. EGRs, if you connect to it, same thing, commanded actual position. And then you have the exhaust fan. There's a total of 3 fans in the system, one for each power supply and an exhaust fan in the back. So I'm going to test the Cummins whole set turbo. Once you select the turbo, you're going to connect to it. Once you're connected, operating status, BGC status will go to operating. If you have a fault code, it'll also populate up there. Click on calibrate. These are all the tests that it's going to do, all the steps. Actuator load, and then range test completion is based on a 0 to 100 and 100 to 0 pass fail. So once this process starts, this will start counting. I'm going to click calibrate. It's going to tell it to get ready to accept the command. It's going to zeroize where it erases all the set points. Once you do this, you have to have the actuator removed from the turbo. And basically what's going to happen is it's going to rotate the gear to find a home position before it actually calibrates. Once that's done, you can reinstall it. Once it's done calibrating, you get a pass, and now what it's doing is doing a 0 to 100 test. So it's basically commanded it to position 1. It's going to wait until it gets a feedback of position 1, and then go to 2, then to 3, then to 4, and so on. Once it reaches 100, it goes back down to 0. And that's it. The actuator is calibrated. Do it again real quick. So if you disconnect the turbo, it's going to reset it. So all you got to do is when you get another turbo to test or to calibrate, just plug it back in and it's ready to go. So with the HU300s, you generally don't have to remove the actuator. Still good practice to do it, but the older ones, the 351s, the 4 and 500s, they still rotate the gear. So right now it's calibrating. And now it's doing the range test, 0 to 100. Hundreds passed, now it's counting back down to 0. That's it. Now, I'll make it fault out, give me a failure, and what I'm going to do is I want to remove the actuator and tell it to calibrate without the actuator. So the actuator gives me an operating status because it still believes it's calibrated to turbo. So just because it says operating and you can manually command the actuator or sweep the actuator doesn't mean you should, reinstall it on a customer's turbo and send it out the door. You still need to calibrate it because you're calibrating it essentially to the install to that specific turbo. So once you deinstall the actuator, it's no longer calibrated. So now it's time to remove it. It would move the gear. Like I said, the 300s don't really do it. Now it's telling me to reinstall it. Now if I click OK and not do that, it's going to attempt to calibrate. I don't know if you were able to hear that or not, but basically gave you a failed. And then of course on top it's saying the actuator is desynced. Press reset. The reset it's talking about is the reset on the button, the silver button that says actuator reset. When I click that, it's going to reset the GUI. When I release the button to power everything back up, it's going to go right back to a 0-watt state. And then all you got to do is put it back on the turbo. So now it's calibrated again. And now it's doing the 0 to 100 test. Now I'm going to do a calibration on a Hino. It has a Jetico or a Musubu actuator. So I disconnected the whole set. I'm going to go down to the Hino Jetico Musuba. Now there's two types. There's a heavy duty, which is HD, and that light duty, the LD. The light duty are mainly on the Hino coasters. The heavy duties are on basically big panel vans and stuff like that that have J04, J05 motors. So once I click on Hino, I'm going to connect to it. And then this actuator doesn't have as much data as the whole set, so you have actuator temp, not applicable. If you have a Hino coaster, even though it's the same actuator, it physically looks the same, it doesn't provide a load, so that would also say NA. Going to click on calibrate. Now this one doesn't have as many steps as the whole sets. You're just going to click calibrate again. On this one here, it's different. So the whole set you have to remove the actuator. This one here, you got to make sure it's connected. And make sure it's connected, click OK. It's going to calibrate, and then it's going to do the same thing. Now this one here is a lot slower. And that's it. Now I'm going to do this again, except this time you're going to watch the painfully slow test right here, but I'm going to put a screwdriver behind it. So the Hinos, in case you don't know, I'm trying to see if I can get a good view for you, is right here. There's a screw, it's a stopper. So when this arm rotates back and forth, it's waiting to find where the setting is. So if you actually calibrate one of these, and then if you can rotate this by hand, you can actually make it go past 0 and it won't count any data. Because this actuator will actually go probably about right here. So it still has a lot more travel. But the whole goal here is just to show you that this is actually testing it. So when it does its range test the second time, it'll run into that screwdriver, and that screwdriver won't allow it to move forward, and it'll actually give you failed because it's not calibrated, but for whatever reason, you know, it's not going to where it's supposed to because that screwdriver's there. And then I'll display the fail. So calibrated. Now it's doing its 0 to 100 range test. It completed the first test. Excuse me. So now it's going back down to 0. God damn it. Alright, so I got the screwdriver in there. And there it goes. Failed. Actuator load went to 100%. Oh man. You see the screwdriver is actually pretty well in there. Alright. So now I'm going to do another calibration, except this one won't actually do the test because I'm going to pull out the arm. If I can get it to move. There we go. So what I did here is I removed the arm that connects the actuator to the turbo, to the vane. So just to go over real quick what just happened. So it calibrated, and then it went to the range test, 0 to 100. It passed the first one, and then when it went to the second one, it failed. And it failed because it couldn't go all the way back down to 0. That screwdriver flathead blocked it from going its full travel. So there's a time step there. After that time step, it'll basically give up on itself and just give you a failed status. So it's calibrated again. Now, I didn't mention this earlier, just having the actuator on the turbo obviously isn't going to calibrate it without that arm. So the first 2 calibrations we did it with the arm installed, and now we're doing it without it. It's desynced. There's nothing for it to identify its range. So if it goes past its range, it's going to fail. And that's it. These so far are the only 2 actuators you actually have to calibrate. I can control a lot. The whole set in Detroit's, they're in the same boat. They're a little bit different, but they're also the same. The Duramax LOI, LBZ, LM, that's more so for future development. I can control them. The thing is, you have to have hydraulic pressure. So what I mean by that is the goal is to set up a jig. You set the turbo on a jig. The jig will, on the bottom will have a quart or 2 of oil, a little oil filter, electric pump to pressurize the system, and then the internal solenoid of that turbo will actually direct the flow of the oil, and then it'll open and close the turbo. The new Duramax L5P, that's on a 2017 and newer Duramaxes. You can control that one, but again, it doesn't require you to actually calibrate, it just moves. We covered the Hinos, the International 6.4s on the the Ford F250, 350s with the 6.4, it's a compound turbo, same thing, you're just actuating it back and forth. DT466, the same thing. So I'm actually going to integrate an additional button here, and basically that button, when you click on it, it's just going to say 0 to 100, 100 to 0 if there's feedback. If there's no feedback, the only thing you can do is actually just sweep the actuator. So if you think like a Hella actuator, there's no feedback coming from the actuator, so really all you can do is just command it and just watch it go back and forth. But yeah, if you guys have any questions, feel free to email me, give me a call. Hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks.